Night had fallen deep, all sounds had faded, and I lay here in the gentle stillness of my familiar room. Outside, the world might still be moving, but in this moment, I allowed myself to slow down, to let my breathing become more even and my heart no longer hurried. I let go of unfinished tasks, unfinished thoughts, and the pressures that had followed me all day. As I closed my eyes, I remembered that God was not resting like me. He was still silently at work, still caring for what I didn't fully understand, still protecting what I hadn't yet asked for. His words reminded me, "Be still, and know that I am God." Psalm 46 verse 10. And that gently anchored my mind amidst the lingering anxieties. Tonight, I didn't need to be strong anymore. I just need to be here, in that silent presence, believing that as I rest, my faith continues to grow quietly, like a seed sprouting beneath the dark soil unseen by anyone. Tonight, I entered dinner already exhausted. All day I had tried to appear fine in the face of questions about work, about the future, about the word stability, that everyone seemed entitled to ask me. When I got home, all I wanted was a quiet dinner, a moment of silence to breathe. But sometimes the safest place is where the things I'm trying to hide are revealed. My mother looked at me very normally and asked, "When will you be settled?" The question wasn't malicious, wasn't raised, wasn't reproachful, but it touched upon the anxieties I'd carried for months. I felt a tightness in my chest, as if I were being judged, even though she might just be concerned. Have you ever felt that way, when a simple question instantly put your heart on the defensive? I answered a little loudly, enough to change the atmosphere. I said that I know how to take care of myself, that I'm not a child anymore, and in the way I said it, there was a layer of prickliness that I myself recognized immediately afterward. My mother fell silent, bent down to continue washing the dishes, and the steady sound of running water echoed in the small kitchen. No one said another word. That moment passed quickly, but it left a heavy void in my heart. I knew I had reacted more strongly than necessary, but my ego still tried to justify it by saying I was just tired, that I just needed to be understood. It's strange how sometimes we easily soften towards strangers, but are hard-hearted towards those who love us most. When I got up from the dining table and walked to my room, I could clearly feel the change in the atmosphere. No one argued, no one slammed the door, but something had cracked. I wondered what I was trying to prove, and to whom, when family should have been a place where I could be vulnerable without defenses. In my room, I sat down on the bed, my heart still burning. I remembered a Bible verse I had read: "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." James 1 verse 19. It didn't come as a reproach, but as a mirror reflecting on myself in that moment. I hadn't slowed down to listen, and I had let my frustration speak before love. Actually, what bothered me wasn't just my mother's question. It was the fear that I might not be as stable as I wanted others to believe. It was the feeling that I was still on a journey, that there were still many things I hadn't achieved, and every time someone mentioned the future, I felt my weak point being touched. I thought of the saying, "For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." 1 Samuel 16 verse 7. And I suddenly realized that perhaps God saw my anxiety more clearly than I did. The sound of water running in the kitchen continued, and in that silence, I began to calm down. The heat was no longer intense, replaced by a nagging feeling. I knew my mother wasn't asking to hurt me, and I also knew I had let the pressures of the outside world seep into my own home. Have you ever brought your weariness from the outside home and unintentionally hurt your loved ones? I remained sitting on the bed, my back against the wall, the room darkening as the light from the porch shone through the window. The sound of water in the kitchen had subsided. Perhaps my mother had finished washing the dishes, but the silence in the house remained. I realized the anger I felt earlier was gone, replaced by a heavy feeling in my chest, as if God was gently touching the deepest part of my heart and asking, "Who are you truly angry at?" Initially, I thought I was angry at my mother for asking at a time when I was tired. But as I calmed down, I realized that what triggered my reaction wasn't the question itself, but the fear behind it. I was afraid that she might see my vulnerability, see the things I was trying to hide behind my busyness and confident answers. I didn't want to be seen as immature, unsuccessful, or unstable. Have you ever realized you reacted strongly simply because someone touched upon an insecurity you haven't dared to confront? I began to recall my mother's gaze when she asked me. There was no criticism in it, just a familiar hint of worry. And I suddenly realized, perhaps she wasn't asking to control my future, but simply to know if I was okay. But I heard the question with defensive ears and answered with wounded pride. The Bible echoed in my mind, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." Proverbs 16 verse 18. I don't think I'm arrogant, but I clearly see that this silent pride has built a wall in my own home. The more I think about it, the clearer I see the flow of my emotions this evening. All day I've tried to prove I'm okay to colleagues, friends, and social media, and when I get home, I still carry the need to appear strong. I've forgotten that family isn't a place to prove anything, but a place where I can be honest. It's ironic that I can pray for God to teach me humility, but find it so difficult to humble myself before my own mother. I stood up, walked to the door, and placed my hand on the doorknob but didn't open it. I heard light footsteps in the living room. Perhaps my mother was getting ready for bed. In that moment, I clearly saw the internal struggle. One side wanted to open the door, step out, and apologize immediately. The other whispered that it could be done tomorrow, that it wasn't a big deal that needed to be done tonight. Have you ever felt that small but very real battle within yourself, knowing what's right but hesitating because of pride? I returned to bed, sat down, and sighed. I knew I needed to confront something deeper than just an apology. I needed to confront the fear that I wasn't as stable as others expected. I needed to admit that I was also confused about the future, that I also had nights wondering if I was on the right track. And perhaps what bothered me most was that my mother had inadvertently touched upon the very question I had asked myself so many times. In that silence, I whispered a very simple prayer. I didn't use grand words, just spoke from the heart. I told God I was tired, that I was afraid of being judged, that I didn't want to be seen as a failure. And then I remembered the words, "Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you." 1 Peter 5 verse 7. It wasn't new to me, but tonight it touched a different spot, a place I tried to keep hidden even from myself. I realized I'd carried my worries about the future alone for too long, and when someone touched it, I reacted as if they were attacking me. But God didn't look at me with disappointment. He didn't ask when I would settle down. He only asked if I trusted him. And when I answered honestly, I knew my faith was still there, even though it was sometimes clouded by anxiety. The clock in the room ticked softly, reminding me that the night was passing. I began to imagine how long the silence between mother and daughter would last if I didn't apologize. It wouldn't escalate into a major conflict, but it would cast a thin veil over future conversations. I didn't want the distance to begin with such small things. I thought of the Lord's teaching, "Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you." Ephesians 4 verse 32. Kindness and tenderness aren't just for strangers, but first and foremost for those closest to us. I began to see my responsibility more clearly. I can't control what others ask me, but I can choose how I respond. I can't force my mother to understand all the pressures I'm under, but I can show her that I'm still a child who listens. Faith isn't just shown in church or during private prayer, but also in how I talk to my mother after a long day. There was a moment when I wondered, if God treated me the way I just treated my mother, would I be able to bear it? I've asked him many times about my future plans, complained many times when things didn't go as planned. But he never raised his voice at me, never turned his back when I showed impatience. Thinking about that, my heart softened a little more. I got up again and walked to the door of the room once more. This time I didn't open it immediately, but I knew my heart had changed. I no longer wanted to protect my strong image. I wanted to protect my relationship. Perhaps tonight's conversation only began with a question, but it opened up a clearer view of myself, of the dark areas in my heart that God is patiently shaping. The night was still quiet, but inside me, the turmoil was gone. I know I'm not perfect, and perhaps tomorrow I will still face questions about the future. But I also know I'm not alone. As I slowed my breathing and closed my eyes, I whispered, "Lord, please fix what I've broken today," starting with my heart before my words. And in that honesty, I felt a gentle hope growing, like a tiny light, but enough to guide me out of this room and do the right thing. I put my hand on the doorknob for the third time tonight, and this time I knew I would open it. Not because I suddenly became brave, but because I understood that if I hesitated any longer, I would return to bed with an unsettled heart. I took a deep breath, feeling the slight tremor in my chest, and stepped out of the room, letting the living room light shine directly into my eyes as a reminder that it was time to face it. Mother was sitting on the sofa, her hands resting lightly on her open Bible. I slowly walked closer, and in those brief seconds, I realized how silently my mother had been praying for me all these years. I couldn't hear her words, but I knew her heart was always with God for me, even when I seemed irritable or distant. Have you ever realized someone has prayed for you more than you think? I sat down opposite her, and my throat felt dry. There was no prepared speech in my head, only a rising sincerity. I said I was sorry for raising my voice, that I shouldn't have said that her question wasn't wrong. I didn't blame the long day. I didn't make excuses about pressure. I just admitted that I had let fatigue guide my words. My mother looked at me, her eyes not angry, only a little sad mixed with tenderness. She said that she was only worried about me, that she knew I was trying, and that she didn't want me to bear the burden alone. Those words weren't loud, but they touched me more deeply than any reproach. I suddenly remembered the saying, "A gentle answer turns away wrath." Proverbs 15 verse 1. And I saw it happening right before my eyes. The moment wasn't dramatic, there were no tears, but there was a very real release. I felt the burden in my heart lighten, as if a taut string had been loosened. I realized that what I feared most wasn't the question about the future, but the feeling of being misunderstood, and that I had contributed to that misunderstanding. After a few minutes of conversation, I got up, wished my mother good night, and returned to my room. This time, when I closed the door, I no longer heard the sound of running water or the heavy silence, only the peaceful tranquility of a healed home. I sat down on the bed, my heart softening, and began to pray in a completely different way than earlier in the evening. I told God that I thanked Him for not letting my pride lead me too far. I thanked Him for reminding me who was truly fighting for me every day. I remembered the words, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts." Psalm 139 verse 23. And I understood that tonight He had done just that, showing me the insecurity I was trying to hide. I no longer felt attacked by the question, "When will I be settled?" Instead, I felt called to trust God more on the uncertain journey ahead. I realized that true stability wasn't just about my job or social standing, but about whether my heart was anchored to Him. And as I reflected on the evening, I saw that God had quietly worked every step of the way, from the moment I was angry until I sat down and apologized. I lay down, pulled the blanket up, and looked at the ceiling in the dim light. My heart was no longer turbulent, but a calm surface after the storm had passed. I whispered, "Lord, please continue to teach me to listen more than to speak, to trust more than to worry, to be more soft-hearted than defensive." I remembered the promise, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." Psalm 34 verse 18. And I clearly saw that He was very close to me all evening. Before closing my eyes, I reflected on the words that had stayed with me all night. "Please fix what I have broken today." And I realized that God is not only fixing the relationship between me and my mother, but He is also fixing the way I see myself. He doesn't demand that I conform to the world's standards before He loves me. He only invites me to trust Him and walk with Him day by day. The room fell into complete silence, and I let my breathing slow. I know that outside, the world continues to ask questions, continues to measure value by specific benchmarks. But tonight, I choose to place my value in the hands of God, who patiently taught me through a very simple question from my mother. I closed my eyes, no longer burdened, no longer defensive. I sleep grateful that even small family conflicts can become the deepest places where God works. And if tomorrow another question stirs my heart, I hope I will remember tonight. Remember that love is always stronger than pride, and that true faith begins in such ordinary things. May God's gentle presence envelop you tonight, like a soft blanket protecting and preserving every thought, every breath. May His grace continue to work in the things sown in this prayer, silently but powerfully, for He has never ceased to work for your life. May the peace of the Lord remain in the room where you lie, remain above your roof, and walk with you into the new day with complete support. His promise is, "The Lord bless you and keep you." Numbers 6:24. And we believe that this protection is real, sufficient, and steadfast through every dark night. May His light shine into the deepest recesses of your heart, bringing you safety and rest. If this prayer has touched you, please gently share it or leave a confession of faith as a way of sowing life for others. Now, rest in the hands of the Lord, protected and loved completely.